So I heard you're going to become an uncle.
Again, yeah.
Oh, again.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought this was the first time, and I always thought, man, I always imagined Dom as a cool uncle.
I pretty much am to the first two. This will be number 3.
Oh,
so,
damn. Oh,
yeah.
There you go. That's awesome, man. Congrats.
Yeah, my sister's 30 now, or she'll be 30 next week, and she's already had 3 kids. So I have no idea if she's going to have any more. I don't think she wants. I don't think her husband wants anymore, but we'll see. But
you never know with those Italians. Let me just say that.
Italians and Irish,
That's where I'm coming from.
Those popes, they don't like safe sex.
Those goddamn Catholics. Oh, wait, you shouldn't say that.
It's all right.
That's all right. Yeah. And you know what? That's just going to take us right into this.
Exactly.
That's a perfect lead in.
That's a good way to win everyone over.
Exactly. To this episode. Let's just get right into it. We're talking about Earvin Magic Johnson here on the Sports Experience with Chris Quinn.
Dom DiTolla.
And with this podcast, we just get into it, talk about some weird stories, some wild stories. Actually, we talk about the interesting stories behind the players.
Yeah, exactly. That's what makes this podcast fun. Everybody has one specific image of these athletes just as athletes, but, they're very complex and interesting people with some very dark or very, interesting or very wonderful things about them.
Yes. They have absolutely checkered pasts most of the time because it's so hard to be in the spotlight and not, have everything thrown at you.
That was the positive for the last episode we did with Bobby Lane in the 50s. Not a lot of media in those days.
No, not at all.
Not a lot of social media, not a lot of people prying into driving down the highway on the opposite side.
That's why Bobby was able to drink 7 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
But that wasn't the case with Earvin Magic Johnson. He was really in this when the media started really taking every single thing that these athletes were doing and exposing it.
Not only exposing it, just blowing it up.
Oh, yeah.
Shedding light on a lot of things that athletes kind of had the luxury of up until about the 1980s where, it's a boys will be boys attitude.
No, it totally was.
Okay, I saw that. Well, that one's getting tucked away for a long time.
And maybe Magic was the one that kind of put the stop to the boys will be boys attitude because, man, he had quite the career.
Yes, not only as a player, but I'm sure this is a pretty famous case. I'm sure most of you know kind of what happened and why his NBA career came to a close.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. He started in college in Michigan.
Yeah,
Michigan State.
Yeah.
The Spartans. I read a little thing that when he went there to play basketball, he didn't think he was good enough to play pro, and he was getting a communications degree because he thought he was going to be an announcer.
And honestly, if you've ever seen Magic Johnson just like talk about basketball or really anything in general, very engaging guy. I mean,
he would have been an amazing announcer. So I could see why he had that as like a fallback. But
very relatable kind of individual. I saw some stuff where he was talking about because the Detroit area was very segregated at the time, and when they started busing, he had to go to an all-white school, and he was very disappointed because the all-black school had a really great basketball team, and obviously as a basketball player, that's kind of where you want to go. And he said while he had hated it at first, it kind of gave him a look into a different lifestyle and taught him how to relate to people that were different from him and kind of, develop as a human being and become the adult that he later became to be.
Yeah, definitely shaped him into the man he was.
Oh,
or
definitely.
Is, excuse me.
Yeah.
He's still alive.
Yeah. Kobe Bryant isn't, but Magic.
Exactly. What a crazy Laker development. Jeez.
I hate to be a jerk, but that was my first thought. I'm like, Magic Johnson outlived Kobe Bryant.
Oh, it's crazy.
Did not see that coming.
So we went to the Spartans. He didn't have the confidence in his basketball, but I think after the first season, everybody could see that, hey, this guy's going to go pro. I mean, he averaged 17 points a game and like 8 assists. And so, I mean, he was definitely right out because Michigan State wasn't a good basketball team. That was the other thing.
They had really, maybe a year or two before, started finally getting some really good players, and they were a real powerhouse, from the late 70s. Until now, even with Izzo, they're a great team.
Yeah, he pretty much made that franchise not a franchise
program.
That program a constant, reliable, winning program.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that's where he met with his rivalry which is one of the best sports rivalries, probably the best one from the
Yeah.
80s, is him and Bird.
Oh, definitely, because in the 79 NCAA tournament final, they played Birds. Indiana State, I believe Sycamores is their nickname. I have to check on that one. But, Magic and Michigan State ended up prevailing, but you could tell that was the future of the NBA right there.
Well, it's interesting. That's the highest rated college basketball game ever.
Yeah.
And you could see that that's really where the game was going, was like television viewership and just mass popularity, which it wasn't before because they were dealing with all this point shaving and all these scandals in college basketball. And then they had Magic Johnson versus Bird in this final, and it really cemented the legitimacy of college basketball.
And that's the cool thing, I think, about guys like Johnson and Bird when it comes to just sports in general, is they're so good. And the hype behind them is so much.
It's worth it at the end.
And it's worth it because they always delivered, always high drama, always quality play. I mean, and I know you had mentioned how, NCAA basketball was kind of in a lull at that point. A lot of people forget the NBA was nowhere near the popularity of NFL or Major League Baseball in the 70s. They were showing NBA Finals games, like the most important games of that sports season, on tape delay in the 70s. I mean, it was rocked by drugs. It was rocked by fights on the court.
Yeah, violence was crazy back then.
And it wasn't popular.
No.
But Johnson and Bird, I mean, they came at a time where they legitimized the NBA. And not only did they carry that through the 80s, you have Jordan right after him.
Yep.
And
they paved the way for Jordan and Air Jordan and this, what we know of what basketball is now, they were really the first to. And I say this about Magic, he did that for the whatever you want to say, the media, the popularity of the game. But within the game, he was maybe the greatest point guard ever.
And he was just an interesting case because, a lot of times, I mean, now obviously, your point guards are like 6'5", 6'6". This is at a time when point guards were like barely 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
He's 6'9", playing point guard.
Yeah, I think he came in at 6'8", and then they measured him at 6'9" the next year, and they were like, awesome.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a ridiculous thing now because all of your ball handlers are so tall. Like, it would be ridiculous to have like a Muggsy Bogues in the league now. But, But back then, it was almost ridiculous to have this 6'9" guy bringing it up the court.
Not only bringing it up the court, but just like dominating in every facet of the game. The guy was
Running.
a triple-double machine.
That's what they said, is he brought back the triple-double.
Yeah.
Like, people weren't doing it because they couldn't catch 10 boards. Or, you know what I mean? Like
the only guys up until Magic who were really like triple-double guys that weren't like centers like Kareem or Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, guys like that.
Whoa, just keep it the Lakers, man.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, here's a guy who didn't play for the Lakers, but I think he averaged a triple-double for a season once. Was Oscar Robertson.
Yep.
But that's all that you had. The game was just mostly, here, large man in the paint, here you go.
Yeah.
And funny story about centers and Magic Johnson. Because he was 6'9", you could pretty much play him at any spot on the court. And when he was a rookie, after he was drafted by the Lakers for the 79-80 season, in Game 6 of the NBA Finals against the Sixers with Kareem hurt, his then coach, Paul Westhead, started him at center in that game.
What an amazing, because when you line up at basketball, you have the toss-up. What an amazing thing to put your point guard, and you're just like, look, Kareem's out. We're going to run Magic at center.
Yeah.
Like, it's great. And in that game, he ran center, power forward, and point guard. Yeah.
This, for those of you who aren't NBA fans, the Sixers were really good in the 70s and early 80s. I mean, this is Dr. J, Moses Malone, Daryl Chocolate Thunder Dawkins. I mean, this was not the
era of the greatest names and the greatest basketball players in 76 history.
Yes, exactly. I mean, Dr. J, that's just amazing.
Yeah.
But
I always Earl the Pearl was always my favorite. But I think it was just because my dad was always into him. And you would get that from him being like, oh, he was the best. And you're like, he was? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, man. But yeah, the Magic just that he took it over.
I think he's the
superstar.
only rookie to be MVP in the final.
He was, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he deserved it because he was so versatile and won that series for them pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, 3 finals MVPs, 3 MVPs of the league for the regular season, and 5 titles. I mean, wherever the guy went, he won. He made his teams better, and he came up big against some of the greatest Celtics teams in league history.
Well, that's when we get back into the Bird. And what made the NBA in the 80s one of the best eras was this rivalry where you had this Celtic team and you had this Laker team, and they kept meeting in these finals.
Yeah.
And it was just so great. Like it was one of these things where in today's sports you kind of see like a player from the Celtics and they get traded to the Lakers. That would never have happened in the 80s.
Those teams, and with any rivalry, probably up until nowadays, you were focused as a team. Like your main goal was to win the championship, and to win the championship against the team that you hated the most.
Exactly.
They weren't in your conference.
They didn't want to see the Pistons in there.
No.
They didn't want to see the 76ers in there.
They just tortured those Pistons teams before they finally broke through. Oh, my God.
Before they finally just beat the shit out of them enough to get through.
We're just going to throw some forearm shivers and have Dennis Rodman run all over the place.
I loved from The Last Dance, Dennis Rodman before he went.
Yep.
It became essentially what we all know Dennis Rodman to be. He like came into the league, and John Staley was like, he was just like super meek and quiet. You're just like, wait, what? Like,
well, I mean, I guess that's what happens when you lose your job as a janitor at the Dallas airport for stealing watches.
Oh, it's so ridiculous.
Oh, I know. His story, holy shit.
Yeah, don't you worry. We'll get into Dennis Rodman's story.
But back to Magic, though.
Yes, please. Back to Magic. Just the meetups with Bird were so iconic.
And these weren't series where one team was just like sweeping either. These are just like teeter-totter, teeter-totter, teeter-totter. Because it's not like like the Lakers and Celtics have had like this long-standing rivalry, but like throughout the 60s and early 70s, it was very one-sided where both teams would meet in the finals, and for whatever reason, Boston would just win.
I was going to say the Celtics just dominated them.
And to me, I think when you break down when you talk about the term rivalry, it's only important if both teams win. I mean, and by importance, I mean it's only exciting. You can only call it a rivalry if both teams win, and both teams. They did win.
They pretty much were going back and forth. Like it was great,
Yeah, I mean, you look at the finals matchups throughout the 80s. It's almost 100% of the time Los Angeles out of the West, 100% of the time Boston out of the East.
Which must have made it so exciting, even if you weren't necessarily like if you were on the East Coast, you had to be siding with Boston. If you were on it was that kind of environment in the NBA.
And you're watching because, and no disrespect to Michael Jordan, who eventually became the greatest player in NBA history, Magic and Bird were the 1A and 1B.
Oh, yeah,
during
definitely.
this entire thing. Yeah.
Definitely.
And, yeah, I mean, reeling off 5 titles in that decade, including 2 back-to-back, I mean, come on.
Yeah. No, and he this was something that I thought was always great about him was great scorer, but he was even better at assist. He's the all-time average assist leader with like 11.8 or some shit like that. But he really controlled every point of the game when he was in it.
There had never been another point guard or really athlete like him in the NBA when he was, in it.
And he's pretty much the prototype for athletes now. Like if you see an NBA player, they're 6'6", 6'8", they have all the ball handling skills, and they can post people up.
They can post people up. They can shoot. They can play defense. I mean, it's like in baseball when they say some guy's a 5-tool player.
Yep.
That's what Magic Johnson really was for basketball.
And everybody tries to compare LeBron and Michael and make that like Jordan and LeBron. I think LeBron, without a doubt, should be compared to Magic.
I completely agree because he's definitely more physically built.
Yes.
And that's just the way athletes, through all the weight training. Yeah, now, I mean, obviously. But yes, the Magic comparison is way better. They play more similar games than him and Jordan.
Almost identical in controlling and passing. And that was when LeBron first came into the league, I was like, dang, Magic might have some competition for assists because of how much attention he gets and then how he can dish the ball. It's one of those things where in basketball, there's like all these great players, and then there's players that just take it a step above.
Yeah.
And I just love seeing that.
And he played, for those of you who don't know, the NBA only in the last like 15 years has started allowing zone defenses.
Oh, yeah.
Magic played in an era where not only the game was more physical and dangerous, he was being bowed up man on man every single time.
Every time.
Yeah. And if you're the Lakers and your point guard is 7 inches taller than the other point guard and much bigger, that's an insane advantage.
Yeah. That's why he kept posting up, and that's why even though he was a point guard, he would do his hook, and which would get over centers, which is so crazy to say that Magic would go in, sky hook it over, a 6'10", 6'11" guy, but the height difference wasn't that crazy.
And Bird was much more reserved and quiet about the way that he, went and did his business. And
Definitely.
Then, it's like I play basketball, I'm dominant. Okay,
I'm
whatever.
gonna hit that turnaround jumper.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make you look awful for 4 quarters and then go home and drink a beer. Like the cool thing about Magic, and I think what really helped the NBA's popularity, and then later with Jordan, was he was such an engaging personality. Like
Showtime.
He gave the NBA a face.
Yeah.
A face they sorely needed at that time.
Yes.
And, made people like, oh, let's watch this Magic Johnson guy.
Exactly.
Let's go to the Forum and, see Jack Nicholson, watching from the bench as he always does, Hey, everybody. Just want to take a quick break to let you know that our Sports Experience podcast is brought to you by Engle Studio here, and they're here in Tucson for all your recording needs.
Yeah, he definitely made the NBA what they are. It's an interesting to look back on what the NBA was pre-Magic, because what the research I took down was they were all the teams were really into drugs.
Oh yeah,
that was the huge thing. Like in the 70s was coke and weed, and you know what I mean. Just like it at post game. They were like nightclubs, essentially.
Yeah, like in the Last Dance documentary, Jordan saying when he first got there, he finds all the veterans in the room. It's like, you had your coke guys, you had your weed guys, you had your beer guys. And he's like, oh my God,
It's just weird to think of professional athletes like that now, but back then it was almost standard.
He was talking about how some of the players were bumming smokes from the coaches.
I know, it's ridiculous.
You would think, but yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say that Bird and Johnson saved the NBA. I mean, I think that's probably too strong a word, but if you want to credit anyone or any players with the boost in popularity of the league and having it maintained for so long until, basically the lockout at the end of the 90s, credit completely due to them.
I think they definitely coincided with the explosion of the TV with the TV right deal, whatever. I'm not going to say that right, but it was just the perfect storm of these two great players, that came together, had this great rivalry, and everybody is now watching it on TV at home, and
you're not going to miss the finals.
Exactly.
There's a very good chance one or both of them will be playing in it.
Yeah, exactly. But that's all Magic's. We went into a bunch of his good stuff. Now we're going to get into a bit of the sad story.
Yeah.
So
the behind the what was that Fox Sports show, Beyond the Lights or something that, or no, something weird. But a little.
So, in was it 91? I found an interview with the trainer of the Lakers. And it was interesting because you never really know how they found out. And he talks about how they found out because, for all of you that don't know, Magic Johnson was contracted HIV in 90-91 around that time.
After the 90-91 season.
Yeah.
After they had lost to Michael and the Bulls in the finals that year. Yeah.
What happened was they did a regular physical. They didn't do an AIDS test because they never did. And then they did a life insurance policy, which is very common at that point. It wasn't before, but it was very common at that point because of the amount of money that they were investing. they would put life insurance policies on these players,
Exactly.
just in case they died, and they could recoup some of the money. When you do a life insurance policy, you have to get an AIDS test.
Yeah, which at that time, let's just say AIDS, they gave it to him because they were legally obligated.
Exactly.
Not because they thought
not that they thought that he was
HIV positive, because AIDS at that time, unfortunately, in our country's history, was relegated to specific communities of the population, and it wasn't viewed as a very, it was viewed very negatively.
Yes.
Viewed very negatively, and the people that were getting it, many considered, okay, well, whatever, it doesn't matter.
And that's what the trainer said. He was completely asymptomatic. There wasn't any
Yep.
tired. He wasn't showing anything in his immune system. And they got the test back, and he said he knew it because he was like, why? Because they sent Magic home.
Yeah.
And they sent the trainer home, and they were like, what? And he called Magic, and he was like, hey, what's going on? Did they tell you anything? And Magic was like, no. And then he thought about it, and he was like, oh, the only test that they gave him outside of their regular physical was the HIV test.
Oh, no.
And that's when he knew, and he was just like, damn. So
That's brutal.
it was brutal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say Magic was in his prime, but he was.
He was about year 12, year 13.
So he was in the twilight, but he still had maybe 4 or 5 years of great basketball to play.
His team just won the Western Conference.
Exactly.
I mean, still competitive. I think you still had Worthy around. Kareem had already retired.
Yep.
But you still had pieces. You were still competitive. I mean, your Portland is definitely ascending in that era. Definitely the Suns are starting to come around, but
They're still one of the best teams, and he's still one of the best point guards, if not the best point guard in the NBA at that time.
the West still ran through LA. It
Yes.
still ran through the Forum every single year.
And he had to retire. This is the part that I want to talk about, is everybody's reaction to his coming out HIV positive,
Yeah, right?
because it was quite a mixed bag. I'll say that.
Very much so. Very much so, yeah, definitely.
First off, I want to say there was a bunch of rumors going around that he was gay,
Yeah.
which I don't think are ever true or proven or.
Those rumors basically came from people who still, because
Because of HIV.
this is the 80s and because of the late 80s, early 90s, obviously now, it was still viewed by large numbers of people as a gay disease.
Now, this is an interesting story that I found. Magic wrote a book with Larry Bird and an ESPN analyst, and they were talking about the Summer Olympics and how Isaiah Thomas didn't go. So Isaiah Thomas was
he was allegedly
the second best point guard in the NBA, and he didn't get the bid to go and play on this dream team. And Magic came out and said, oh, that's because we all hated Isaiah. And me specifically, Isaiah released a story, and the story came out maybe 3 or 4 months before Magic announced his HIV,
Yep.
that he was gay or bisexual, and it was completely Isaiah Thomas telling people this
Yeah.
about Magic, and Magic was just like, no, we just all hate him.
Yeah, no, I mean, not only that, if you piss off, and we're talking about the 92 Dream Team just for a second here.
Yeah.
Greatest collection of basketball players that's ever existed. Was Isaiah Thomas talented enough to play on that team? Oh, yeah. Oh, he definitely was. But when you piss off Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson, you are not getting on that roster.
Yeah, Larry Bird also. And Larry Bird's probably the nicest guy. He was like, I don't like him.
Oh, Larry Bird's hatred of the Pistons has to be just so vast.
Oh.
So vast.
But that's one of the reasons was there was all these rumors coming out that he was gay, and it just is completely unfounded. And I think you're right with the association with the HIV was back in 90s, 80s. You would hear that and you would immediately associate it with that, even though it literally didn't have, anything to do with that.
Yeah, like while it definitely affects certain groups more than other groups, just because you get it does not mean that you live that lifestyle.
Exactly.
It can, and that's kind of the thing while researching Magic that I found out and came to realize is he was the first I mean, obviously he's an athlete, but like celebrity personality to get it, who did not happen to have that unfortunate stigma of the time of being, LGBTQ, whatever it is now, that he was the first one to come out and be like, yeah, you people could finally put a face to it.
Yeah.
To the disease.
There were a lot of these closeted athletes and celebrities that died of AIDS, and they were all
Rock
gay.
Hudson,
Rock Hudson. There was a football player. I think his name was
Jerry Smith.
Jerry Smith.
Should be in the Hall of Fame, by the way, one of the best tight ends in league history.
But is not, yes.
Yeah.
And who was gay and died of AIDS.
Yeah.
And there was all these stigmas attached to it, like, hey, if you get AIDS, then hey, you're gay. That's just it.
Yeah, and it's so ignorant. I mean, obviously you have to put it, we can't apply 2019 standards to what 1991 standards are, but the reason we have 2019 standards is because of people like Magic Johnson.
Exactly.
Because the wider public could see, holy shit, this happened to the ringleader of Showtime?
Yeah. Yeah. The ringleader. That's pretty good. I love
Yeah.
that. But yeah, he really became the face of the HIV virus. And he said it was a blessing and a curse because he could spread so much awareness about it.
Yeah.
But also hated the fact that people...
That's all they're going to know him as now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that people might assume that if they get it, they would survive.
Yes,
he said
also.
He is adamant the only reason that he got it, he was in peak physical condition. They caught it early
Yes.
before symptoms came out, and they were able to essentially nullify it into the HIV and not let it transform into AIDS.
And it's basically not South Park had a dark but obviously South
Semi-accurate.
Park
Yeah.
joke about him and his cure for AIDS is putting just massive amounts of money in a blender and
Liquefying it and injecting it into his veins.
Exactly.
Yeah, but he was lucky because of his money but
his health, just
because of
his
physical
overall health
yes.
in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was able to survive because of it. And kudos to him for making it happen. But, like we had talked about before, you had finally had a face to it.
Yeah.
A face that, you don't know the guy personally, but he's everywhere. He's advertising everything. He's on TV from October through June playing basketball.
I think when he retired, one of the big people coming out, and this is the thing that's weird, is I don't think he necessarily should have been playing basketball if he had the HIV because there's so much contact.
Yeah.
In the time, because there was so little known about the disease.
Exactly.
So it's not because, like nowadays, I feel like it would be almost more acceptable because we know more about it.
Yeah, and how it's transferred and things like
transferred.
that. I mean, there were a lot of people because pre-Dream Team, he had, pre-summer of 92, they had brought him to the 92 All-Star game in February of that year.
And Karl Malone said he didn't want, and we all know what a piece of shit Karl Malone is.
Karl Malone is, well, let's just say a not good person.
That's a nice way to way to put it. But
I
he
mean,
was one of the big guys that was like, I don't want to go out there and play against him.
But there were a lot of guys that came to his defense.
Yeah.
A lot of guys,
hugged him, and they said that was a big, because people didn't want to touch people with HIV.
No,
back
I mean,
then.
they were basically, that was leprosy.
It was
of
leprosy.
the 80s.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
And because so little research was done and so few things were known.
Yes.
But he, through his, fame and recognizability, kind of broke down those barriers. He was able to do that for greater society. It's
brought
like
awareness.
Just awareness about everything. And, he had people like Bird and Jordan and guys like, I don't care. That's
unfortunate. That was the thing that all the players said when they heard about it. They weren't necessarily scared for themselves. They were like, oh, because Magic was such a nice guy, such a great personality, and such a great basketball player that they were just like, this is extremely sad.
They felt bad for their friend, like anyone would
Exactly.
in that type of situation. Absolutely.
Exactly. So after he retired, after he played the All-Star game and all of that, he actually made a comeback with the Lakers.
Yep.
Which is a little bit more crazy than him just kind of staying, I felt like.
Yeah.
because he was a different shape. Does that make sense? He had gained maybe 20 pounds of muscle, but he was a different player.
Yeah, but he was in his late 30s by then.
Yes.
You're not getting...
They brought him back as a novelty, as like, hey, there's magic.
Yeah, and this was during an era of Lakers basketball where Showtime is dead, everything from the 80s is gone.
They were trying to rebuild, but they couldn't.
Yeah, you're unsuccessfully rebuilding, and you're making the playoffs every year, but you're like a 5 seed.
Exactly.
Like, you're competitive, but, with most professional sports, you want your big market teams to be the draw. Mm-hmm. You want them to be good. You want them because when they're good, everybody loves them and everybody hates them. And they were just kind of a meh franchise.
Yeah, you don't want them to be in the middle. You want to be on the bottom or the top.
Exactly.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I think it might have been because they brought him in to coach like 20 games at the end of a season.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if it was from the coaching or when they brought him back to play, but there was an agreement that if he did this, Jerry West was going to sell him 5% of the Lakers.
Oh, wow.
And that's why he ended up initially getting his stake in the Lakers. Was they were like, hey, we need you to come back to get some hype on this team.
Yep.
And he did that, and people say it was like one of the best business decisions because Lakers then exploded they were a huge franchise, but they really exploded as a franchise.
Yeah, I think they got Shaq and Kobe the same year. And then they kind of ascended, and then Phil Jackson came in and was like a plague to the rest of the Western Conference.
Exactly. He's like, look, we're going to run the triangle.
We're going to run the triangle and destroy the hopes and dreams of Suns and Spurs and Mavs fans.
What I imagine Phil Jackson did when he came in, he just goes, hey, you guys remember Michael Jordan? We're going to do that again.
Only our center is not Luke Longley and the genie from Kazam.
I was talking with this about my brother about Shaq, and if he could have stayed the size he was when he came in to Orlando.
Dude, he was running the floor in Orlando.
Running the floor. He looked like he looked like a different player.
Yeah.
Especially with him like later in his career at like the Heat. Yeah. He was like really overweight.
He was just kind of an immovable object by that point. But I mean, when you watch some of those old Laker, or not even Laker highlights, I'm talking about like Magic highlights.
Magic is what I was.
Especially when they got Penny and they were able to really run the floor. And Penny, a lot of people were calling him the next Magic Johnson because he was about 6'6", 6'7".
And a great point guard.
Doing all this. I mean.
And they had Horace Grant. They were a great team. But my brother was just like, I don't think he could keep that weight off. I think that was just like.
Yeah.
Because his body was just so gigantic.
I mean, when you're like 7'2", you can have a frame that supports like 3 bills pretty easily.
Yeah.
And I mean, like anybody, as they get older, unless you're in like an insane workout regimen, you're gonna pack on some extra lbs. That's just
that's just life.
That's just life.
Let's live it.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, the 5% in the stake in the Lakers. Yeah. Brilliant.
No, one of the best. That's what they say. One of the best business decisions. And then because they wanted him in the Laker family, and Jerry West was like, "Hey, we'll sell you this for." I can't even imagine how little they sold it to him for. How much it's worth now.
Oh God. Well, he has stake in the Dodgers now. He has stake in the WNBA team. I mean, he's got his fingers everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, as far as like sports in the LA area,
one of the best. I would say Michael's probably the best, but one of the best. Post-athlete businessmen, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
after
he's
their
kept
career,
his revenue stream going
exactly
without an issue.
And there's a lot of those guys that just go bankrupt.
Oh God, I mean the list goes on of those guys.
We might even have to do a couple episodes on that because is so sad.
It is. It's like watching 2 trains on the same track coming together because you can see it miles away, and you're just like. I don't want to look at this impending disaster, but
somebody's got to watch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anything else on Magic?
No, other than just what a very dominant player he was.
For me, he was the best point guard ever.
Oh yeah,
especially because he transformed the game. He wasn't my favorite point guard, but he was. I would say the best.
just a dominant player and influential person overall, and just his, kind of the reason we do this podcast, his appeal and reach, not even playing, is so vast.
Yeah, still.
So vast. I mean, still today.
Yeah.
Like I said, he outlived Kobe.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's like,
I think that's going to be the earmark from this episode.
yeah. No, but I mean, seriously, to think in 1991 that something like that, especially with the treatments that they had at the time for
I saw
that
a
virus.
sportscaster who was just like, I didn't think he was going to live till 95, and if he did, he would be like a shell of the person he was.
Yeah.
That was the thought, the mentality of when he came out. It was like, hey, I have HIV. It was like, oh, he's dead.
And it's not like he's been super like defensive about it or like closed off. It was very eye-opening for the world to see.
And was very open about the sexual exploits that he had. He was just like, I just had 6 women at a time and just all this. And you were like, you got to be careful.
And he talked about how in the 80s, straight men didn't think about that.
No, why would they? Because of the stereotype that HIV was carrying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's why everybody felt so damn bad for him. All right. Thank you all very much. I'm Chris Quinn.
I'm Dom DiTolla.
And we'll be at you next time.
All right.